Run It By My Lawyer podcast has obtained the verdict form from the Donald Trump case. Did that sound good? All right, cool. In editing, make it sound like legit and professional. Like make me sound like I know what I'm doing. Yeah. All right.
When you said in that video that Ms. Leeds would not be your first choice, you were referring to her physical looks, correct?
Just the overall. I look at her, I see her, I hear what she says, whatever. You wouldn't be a choice of mine either, to be honest with you. I hope you're not insulted.
Hey, my friends, how's it going? As always, it's good to be back, and thank you for all the comments in the past week. I love answering those, so keep them coming if you have questions and comments. What I'm going to talk about today, this trial, Carroll versus Donald Trump, this would have been one of the biggest trials. I mean, we have a former president of the United States being accused of rape and possibly our next president. And none of it was televised. We couldn't hear any of it because the federal court has this policy where they don't show trials. And it is ridiculous, right? Like, where's the transparency? Instead, we get these very lame sketches that don't help us in any way, like whatsoever. And there were witnesses who testified, in this trial. There was, everything, right? The Amber Heard, Johnny Depp, like that was like shoved down our throats, And I assure you that if that trial was not televised, nobody would have cared, or watched it. And this trial, it's a big injustice that it's not something that we could have watched. And it wasn't recorded at all, so that even if we wanted to watch it later, we can't, And to me, it's that is a policy that just absolutely has to change, We're working on it, but it's not easy. Because we'd have to go to the federal court and tell the federal court to change its policy, right? And in this particular case, let me kind of lay down what happened. So we have Jean Carroll in 2019, in the middle of Donald Trump's presidency. She came public and said that in the mid-90s, he sexually assaulted her at a clothing, department store. And that, that happened in 2019, in 2019, she said that had happened in 1995 or 1996. And then, so what would that be, about 25 years before, okay? Shortly after she said that, Donald Trump denied it, like just flat out denied it, said she's, lying, she doesn't know what she's talking about, she's not telling the truth, all that, She's not even my type, as he said. Okay. And so then she filed a lawsuit against him. And in a lot of these cases, what happens is this, the statute of limitations for suing someone for a sexual assault is, let's say, 2 years or 3 years. So this happened, 25 years before she came out and said it. So clearly the statute of limitations had passed. So she has no case against him. Once he publicly denies it and calls her a liar, then she has a potential case for defamation. And that starts the day he said that. And then that statute of limitations has not run. So it's kind of a weird thing. It's a lawsuit for defamation, but not for the actual sexual assault. But truth is a defense in a defamation case. So if he can show that it's true that she lied, do you see what I'm saying? Then, she can't win a defamation case. So then the sexual assault case comes into play, even though the lawsuit's not about the sexual assault. Do you see what I'm saying? That's kind of a weird kind of like loophole in the legal system. So this is why a lot of lawyers will tell their clients, just don't say anything, right? Just say, I have no comment. But one thing Donald Trump loves to do is comment, right? This is what he said.
And he went after me on the plane. Yeah, I'm going to go after. Believe me, she would not be my first choice, that I can tell you.
So there you have it. So she files this lawsuit, right? Now, this is what gets crazy. We're in November 2019, okay? The first order of business when she filed a lawsuit against him is this. The Department of Justice, the Federal Department of Justice, took over the defense saying, well, when Donald Trump denied this, he's the president, and he denied it in an official kind of statement, like an official capacity as the president. So we are going to defend him, and she cannot sue him personally. She has to sue the government, which would be a tougher case because she has to, it's one thing to go after Donald Trump, but it's another thing to sue the federal government, right? So the federal government took over the case, right? And then there became this dispute over, whether or not he made that statement in his official capacity or in his, what's it called, like a personal capacity. And then that issue took several years, okay? That was the first order of business. What happened was the court in New York, the federal court in New York, denied the Justice Department's, motion to take over the case. And it took a couple years. Get this. There was an appeal, and I just can't believe how this happened. Somehow the district court in Washington, D.C. heard an appeal for what the New York federal court adjudicated. And I know why it happened is because then, they kind of, the Justice Department filed in Washington, D.C. while there was, the ongoing case in New York. Isn't that wonderful? Instead of one lawsuit, we got two lawsuits, right? More money. Okay. So now, and then ultimately that district court in DC also rejected the motion, for the government to take it over. Then the Department of Justice filed an appeal to the Second Circuit Court of Appeal. All right. And that court then had the case. Now, something happened in November 2022. Okay. During, and then, by the way, have we even gotten to the merits of the case? No, because it's kind of just like on this procedural issue, like, oh, was he in his capacity or not? And all of that is being kind of like argued with all these courts, right? Then in November 2022, in May 2022, a law passed in New York that stated, starting in November 2022, any victim of a sexual assault can file a lawsuit. They get 1 year from November 2022 to November 2023. They get 1 year to file a lawsuit for sexual assault. It's like they renewed the statute of limitations, okay? And they said anytime any adult who's still alive, even if that sexual assault happened in 1960, okay, it doesn't matter. Anytime they open the statute of limitations, and there's a lot of, theories and reasoning why they did it. It wasn't for this case because the same thing happened in California and other states. It's because a lot of people, the victims of sexual abuse, they don't file a lawsuit within 2 years. It just takes longer in a lot of cases to process it or be willing to come forward or like other factors. So the state of New York, like many other states, kind of opened that. So while that issue was going on appeal, she files a new lawsuit in November 2022. The law said that you could start filing on November 23rd, 2022. So her new lawsuit was filed the next day, November 24th, 2022. So now, in addition to being able to sue him for defamation, guess what she added on? the sexual assault case, right? This is the same thing that I said earlier she couldn't do because, the statute of limitations. But once it reopened, she filed a whole new lawsuit. And during this lawsuit, we'll call this the second lawsuit. During the second lawsuit, finally, the appellate court rendered its decision on the first lawsuit. And what it said, and that's the one about his official capacity, they said, well, I'll give you the short version. It's such a close call. If that's his official capacity or personal capacity, just let the jury determine it. All right. Thanks a lot. It took several years to decide, right? So they said that's a factual issue. We'll let the jury decide. So there you go. Now we have our case. So it took about 3.5 years or a little over 3 years, just so we could talk about the merits of the case. The merit being, when we say merits, we mean like not the procedural issues like jurisdiction or, who's going to defend Donald Trump. And by the way, so for all those years in that first lawsuit, it was the federal government that defended him. So, and something like they spent $12 million or some crazy amount. I don't know the exact number because I couldn't find it, and how much they had to spend to defend him. Okay, so they defended him. But then finally, in the second lawsuit, he hired his own lawyer. And there you go. Okay, so now what happened in this second lawsuit? Okay, so she files it, right? He did Donald Trump just because he's Donald Trump, right? He added some oil to the fire. In October 2022, he said this Bergman-Goodman case, and what he meant by that was because she claimed that he sexually assaulted her at this clothing store. And it's called Bergdorf Goodman. I think a New Yorker would know what I'm talking about. I heard it was popular in New York, right? So this case is a complete con job. I don't know this woman. I have no idea who she is, other than she seems to have a picture of me from many, many years ago. She completely made up a story that I met her at the doors of this crowded New York City department store and within minutes swooned her. So this is Donald Trump's statement. It is a hoax and a lie, just like the other hoaxes have been played on me for several years. She has no idea and Donald Trump, and he said this about other cases like the Supreme Court Justice nominee Kavanaugh. He said, this lady doesn't have an idea of what day this sexual assault allegation occurred. She has no idea what week, what month, what year. And it's true. She didn't remember the year, 1995, 1996. And he's saying, or what decade this so-called event supposedly took place. I think that part, it was, she did say it was in the 90s, right? The reason she doesn't know is because it never happened and she doesn't want to get caught up with the details that, she's a liar and that she's trying to sue CNN and Andy Cooper. Okay, so now he's challenging her truthfulness, which is especially upsetting because she's a journalist, right? So the last thing a journalist wants for her reputation, I guess, right, would be that she's making up stories, right? So that is what he's alleging here. Now, we finally start kind of getting closer to the trial, because, the trial is over. And so now I'm kind of like walking you through it. There was a lot of very big decisions that the judge made in anticipation of this trial. And a lot of those decisions are things like, what can we allow to, the testimony that we allow the jury to hear, the testimony that the jury can't hear, what testimony is going to be said and when and all that jazz. Okay. So I'll walk you through some. So now for you law students, this is called the rules of evidence. And it's, the arguments are usually done through motions in limine. So that when the different, sides are debating, don't let that witness get in and that witness should be allowed, or this particular document should be allowed and all that. Okay, so we'll start with the most popular one, right? The so-called Hollywood access tape, right? Where Donald Trump, not knowing he was on a hot microphone, said, when you're popular like me, you could just grab them by the, right? So he said that, and he said, it doesn't matter. You're, blah, blah, blah. You guys remember it. Okay. I don't have to re-say it. So that is a very, very bad piece of evidence, right? Because she's alleging that that's what he did. Okay. And that he said on a microphone to, then it was his voice, obviously, he straight said it. I could do this because I'm famous, right? And I could just grab him by the you-know-what whenever I want to. His lawyers argued that shouldn't be admissible because it didn't relate to this case at all. It kind of would prejudice, it's more, there's this balancing test we do in rules of evidence. And that balancing test goes like this. On the one scale, we have what we call probative value, meaning like the valueness of that testimony, in terms of the case. And then on the other side, we have what's called prejudicial, meaning like it's not, going to help the case and it's just going to make him look bad for no reason, right? So the judge has a lot of discretion, not complete discretion. It could be overturned on appeal in terms of whether, the probative value outweighs the prejudicial value. In this case, Judge Kaplan ruled that it would be admissible, okay? So that the jury would hear all of this and that they could hear that this guy likes to just grab women by the you-know-what, right? That's a big decision. And that's a ground for appeal, saying that's how a lot of cases, most cases that on appeal, they say, well, yes, the jury, ruled against Donald Trump because the judge allowed evidence that shouldn't have been admitted and it prejudiced him. The beauty about appeals is had she not allowed that and the plaintiff lost, then guess what? Not allowing it would have been a ground for appeal, right? So that's going to be an interesting one. And I anticipate that would definitely go on appeal. Now, there's more, okay? There was another very important piece of evidence, and that is testimony from two of Jean Carroll's friends, Lisa Birnbach and Carroll Martin. And both of these friends testified that shortly after this, in the 90s, that Jean Carroll called these two friends of hers and told them about what Donald Trump did to her, about the sexual assault. That evidence helps show that, she did tell somebody back then. And if she, obviously back in the mid 90s, it would be crazy for her to anticipate that one day in 30 years from now, this guy's going to become president. And so I'm going to lie and tell these girls that he sexually assaulted me just so I could one day have them as witnesses, right? The theory being she's telling the truth if she reported this to a couple of friends of hers back in the mid 90s. That is very, very big evidence. Donald Trump's lawyers argued to the judge that evidence should not be admitted because they're friends of hers, that, anyone could say anything, or maybe they're lying because they're friends of hers and they never reported it back then, the people that heard this and all that jazz. The judge allowed that evidence, all right? Another possible ground for appeal. By the way, both the Hollywood Access tape and the thing about these two witnesses, my gut feeling is if this was a criminal case, I don't think any of that would have been admitted. It's a different rule of evidence with criminal cases. And it's very clear, especially the Access Hollywood tape, if it's not related to this exact case, it's almost impossible to get it into evidence in a criminal case. In civil cases, there's a little bit more kind of leniency there, okay? And another thing is, I told you about the statute of limitations. That only applies to civil cases where they opened up the statute of limitation. It would be a constitutional violation to open up a criminal statute of limitations, because once somebody is, the statute of limitations has passed, you cannot retroactively increase the statute of limitations for criminal cases. That's a constitutional violation, but you can for civil cases. Okay. So the judge allowed this evidence. The reason why I'm going over this evidence in so much detail is because the plaintiff won the case and won big. And a lot of it is because of what evidence was allowed, right? Okay, so then there's more. Let's see. There was two other witnesses, two women, okay, we'll just go by their first name, Natasha and Jessica, who both claim that around this time, Donald Trump sexually assaulted them. All right. Again, I cannot believe any of this. We did not. This is a tragedy when Joe Samo's Run It By My Lawyer could be viewed more times than that lawsuit, right? It's like, come on. Why? That's not cool. Okay. So, yeah. So here we go. The judge allowed this, and this would never have been allowed in a criminal case, or very, very unlikely. These two women testified that around this time, in the mid-90s, that they had also been sexually harassed by Donald Trump. Oh, I'm sorry, sexually assaulted by Donald Trump, and in similar types of incidences. One of the women claimed, and just Natasha and Jessica, one of them claimed that, she was visiting their house. Well, let me quote it so that I don't, Okay, yeah, so she was kind of like visiting. Okay, journalist Natasha testified that while visiting Mar-a-Lago, Trump brought her to look at a room while his wife was changing outfits. He allegedly forced her against the wall and kissed her while she tried to push him off and told her they were going to have a love affair. Okay, so so that was testimony the judge allowed, right? Obviously not good testimony for Donald Trump, right? And then just to make matters, as if that wasn't enough, right? So what did Jessica say? She said that in the late 70s, a flight attendant came up to her and said, hey, somebody wants you to hang out in first class. Jessica goes to the first class, and guess what? She sees someone with no class. No, I'm just kidding. Donald Trump is there. And this is in the late 70s. Then she says, she testified in this trial, he then proceeded to grope her and kiss her, and that she had to fight, and that he took his hand and went up her skirt with his hand. And then she recalled, like kind of yelling and screaming and running away. And then just to make matters worse, one day he saw her and he said, oh, that's the C word from the airplane. So that didn't make her any happier, right? Okay. Sorry, man. It's just hard to talk about sometimes. Okay. So there you have it. So all of these people testified. Now, let me say the big testimony, obviously, was the testimony from the plaintiff herself, right? So what did she say? So again, she said that this happened at this clothing store, and that she said she testified and explained why she didn't mention anything for about 25 years, give or take. So she claimed that she kept it in for 25 years. And then when he became president, all these other women were coming forward with stories of sexual assault that they had from Donald Trump. And that she felt that was kind of courageous of them to do. She then said that in 2017, when this whole Harvey Weinstein scandal came out, and the Me Too movement, she said that gave her a lot of courage. And then she said that she wanted to come out around that time, but her mom was dying. And she then said that she would wait because she didn't want all of, to come out while her mom was, in her last days, right? Okay, so now her testimony went like this. So she was at this department store, and as she was leaving the department store in the mid-90s, Donald Trump is walking in. He thinks she's pretty. According to her, there was this one party that in New York. She had this one picture that she was near Donald Trump, and then he recognized her. This is her story, right? And that he said, hey, I want to buy something for, my wife, or girlfriend or something like that. Maybe you could help me find a gift. So come back inside with me so we could help find a gift. So she goes back inside with him. He was looking for a hat or something, she said. And they're in this department store looking for hats and stuff. And then Donald Trump says, I got a better idea. Why don't we look for lingerie? Maybe you could help me find lingerie for my wife, okay? And so she goes up with him. She says, okay, I will help you find lingerie for your wife. So they ride up an escalator to the lingerie department. And then when they're looking at lingerie, he's kind of flirting with her, she said. Then he said, why don't we go to the dressing room so you could try this on? And then she said she went into the dressing room so she could try it, or she went into the dressing room. He kind of joked with her that maybe he'll try it on. Okay. But he said, let's go into the dressing room. So she thought, oh, cool. Let's go to the dressing room. Okay. And then in the dressing room, she's still thinking, according to her story, that this is all her trying to help him find lingerie for his wife. Okay. And that now they're in the dressing room. And I'm going to say, okay, so immediately Trump lunged at Miss Carroll, pushing her against the wall, bumping her head, and putting his mouth on her lips. She shoved back, utterly shocked by Trump's unexpected attack. She said that she was so nervous that she started laughing. And a lot of people, when they get nervous and whatnot, some people scream. She said, she doesn't scream and like she didn't scream. Some people are quiet. Some people fight back. Some people, people handle things differently. So she started like laughing because she got so nervous, is what she said. Then he wouldn't stop. And then ultimately she does say that in no uncertain terms that he forced himself sexually, So this was not, what's it called? Like, okay, I'll read the exact words. Trump opened his overcoat and unzipped his pants. He then pushed his fingers around her genitals and forced his penis inside of her. So she's claiming full-on rape. The reason why I'm saying that is because a lot of people I read in comments that, I had like a little short thing that I mentioned about this case, and mostly just because why can't we watch it? A lot of people said it's not a rape case. She never alleged it was rape. She did. So I have to make that part clear because she alleged it. Okay. So I just want to make sure everyone knows what the story is, right? Okay. So that was her testimony. Clearly the most important testimony of all, right? And Trump's lawyer cross-examined her, saying what day, what year, what this, what that, right? We don't remember that. Why didn't you tell anyone in the late 90s? Why didn't you tell anyone you're a freaking journalist? Why aren't you saying any of this? Why did you wait so long? And did you, like, where were you? And why were you looking at lingerie with him? Why would you let him go? Like, why did you go inside of a dressing room with him? Like, did you intend to not do anything with him sexually if you're going inside of a dressing room with lingerie on, or not lingerie on, but, trying out lingerie? Do you see what I'm saying? So, man, that must have been a tough testimony. I would like to see that testimony and cross-examination, right? Wouldn't that be interesting? Wouldn't that be interesting? We can't watch it. It was never recorded because the federal court just didn't allow it. This testimony being so important, but nobody had access to it. All we could do is look at these stupid drawings. Okay, so all of that testimony and the cross-examination, which was, it lasted a few days. All of that happened. Now, Donald Trump decided not to testify, okay? And they decided not to call him as a witness. So in civil cases, civil being a non-criminal case, right? Because as we all agree, this is anything but civil. This is like a complicated, uncomfortable case to discuss, right? In a civil case, a defendant does not have to testify. A plaintiff does not have to testify. And, but the plaintiff can force a defendant to testify, and a defendant can force a plaintiff to testify. Okay. So in this case, Donald Trump didn't want to testify, and the plaintiff figured we're not going to have him testify if he doesn't want to. I personally think he should have testified. I could see why he didn't, because he didn't want to deal with it. And maybe, he thought he would have been a bad witness, or, whatever it is. Right. And the fact that he doesn't testify, at least he could tell the public, right? I wasn't even there, so they're just going to believe anything she says because I wasn't there. So maybe for reasons other than the legal case, he didn't want to testify for whatever reason. He didn't have to show up and he didn't want to testify. Now, in criminal cases, you cannot force a defendant to testify. A defendant can decide not to testify, and you can't force the defendant to testify. Okay, so there you have it, right? But the civil case, you can, but they didn't want to. Okay, now comes the verdict. All right. So we have, so like the documents from the case, right? Like I was able, so here's the verdict. By the way, what's funny is I always love when like news outlets like CNN will say something like, CNN has obtained the verdict, right? They make it sound like so professional and cool. But in reality, you just go on the internet, dang it. Like it's a federal case. It's all like the documents are public, Anyway, so I want to sound good. Run It By My Lawyer podcast has obtained the verdict form from the Donald Trump case. Did that sound good? All right, cool. In editing, make it sound like legit and professional. Like make me sound like I know what I'm doing. Yeah. All right, cool. Okay, here's the verdict form. The first question. Now the jury gets this questionnaire, okay? And in the questionnaire, they, it's kind of like what the jury decides. And this is a unanimous jury. The first question, did Ms. Carroll prove by a preponderance of the evidence, okay, that's a lower standard than in a criminal case, beyond reasonable doubt, civil case, preponderance of the evidence, that Donald Trump raped Ms. Carroll? The jury said no. Okay, so the jury did not think, at least there wasn't enough evidence, and they did not think that he actually physically the definition of rape being, you have to like physical penetration, not just like kissing or hugging or something like forcefully. No, it's actual like penetration. And they're saying he did not rape her. Did Mr. Trump sexually abuse Ms. Carroll? They said yes. Okay, so this is the jury saying yes. And just to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 jurors. Okay, so the jury said yes, he did sexually abuse her. Miss Carroll injured as a result of Mr. Trump's conduct? The jury said yes. The injury being, could be an emotional injury. Then they said, if yes, insert a dollar amount that would fairly and adequately compensate her for that injury. $2 million. So they awarded her $2 million for the emotional suffering that she had because of the sexual abuse. Okay. And just to be clear, not rape, sexual abuse. Okay. And then was his conduct, this one was Mr. Trump's conduct willful, negligent, reckless, or done with a conscious disregard of her rights, or was so reckless as to amount in such disregard? This, I don't, they said yes, and then they gave her another $20,000 for that one. Okay. Okay. All right. So then the reason why that one, it's a weird one. They're saying they nailed him for the bigger crime. Then they also nailed him for the lesser crime. The lesser crime being like, oh, did he like do something negligently that also upset her in addition to the intentional crime? Okay. All right. So anyway, so that was that. Now the next $3 million, okay, was this. Okay. Did he defame her? Remember, this is all the stuff he talked about her later, calling her a liar and this is a hoax and all that. They said yes. Was Mr. Trump's statement false about her? They said yes. Now, and that one, she has to prove in New York law by a clear and convincing evidence. So it's a little bit of higher standard. The jury still said yes. They said, did Donald Trump lie about her with actual malice? They said yes. Okay. Was she injured as a result of his publication in October 2022? I was saying some of that. The one where he's calling her just flat out liar. They said yes. What would be a fair amount for the damages to her reputation? They said $1 million. Okay. Then, if yes, insert a dollar amount for any damages. Oh, okay. So this is the funny part. So insert a dollar amount for any damages. Oh, forgive me. Okay. They ask two questions here, the judge. One, how much should she get for her injury other than reputational damage, meaning her pain and emotional damage from him lying about her? They said $1 million. Then it said, how much should she get for damages to her reputation? You know, this one being like, if you say something about a doctor and he loses his job, let's say, it could be he's emotionally hurt because this lie, and then he also lost his like career. You know, so that's that second version. You know, the actual like kind of the damage to the reputation. They gave her $1.7 million for that reputation damage. So that defamation, the defamation was a bigger deal to the jury, like damages wise, than the actual sexual abuse. Okay, because they're awarding her $270,000, $2,700,000. Okay, actually, and then there's more. In making the defamatory statement, did Mr. Trump act maliciously out of hatred, ill will, spite, or so this is like it's like a punitive damages basically. You know, or willful disregard. They said yes. So it's like, it's one thing if you lie about somebody because you're a jerk. And then it's another thing in New York if you lie about someone because you're an a-hole. Do you see what I'm saying? The a-hole one is like actual malice. So that's like worse, right? So they said, yes, he lied about her because he's an a-hole, not just a jerk. How much do you want to give him for that? They said $280,000. So we add all of that up, we get something over $4 million. In some news outlets, it's a little bit over $4 million. I think they said $5 million. I know why they said that. And that's because in addition to this $4 million plus dollars that the jury awarded, her lawyers are going to be able to make a motion for attorney fees. And I'm sure they're going to ask for like another $1 million for attorney fees, and that'll be granted. It's the law. You know, maybe some, maybe a little less, maybe a little more. So yeah, so it's a little over $4 million that the jury awarded, rounded on up to $5 million when you tack on the jury fees, and that's the case. It's the most important case, I think, that nobody will ever get to watch or listen to. All right, there you have it. Thanks so much, folks. I'll see you next week.